A long time ago, back in the 1600s, 102 people got on a ship to sail to a new world. The reason they did this was so they could live in a place where they were free to worship God. Right now, they were only allowed to go to one church, and that church was not teaching the Bible. These were brave men and women, and we know them as the Pilgrims. They left everything, their country, their houses, their lands, and even other loved ones, and sailed across the ocean. The Pilgrims spent 3 wet, drippy, cold months at sea. Does anyone know the name of the ship they sailed on? That's right, the Mayflower. Some days it may have been like this on the ocean. They arrived in America in the cold month of December. William Bradford, who was one of the Pilgrims, said that as soon as they landed safely, they fell on their knees and blessed the God of heaven, for it was He who brought them safely across the vast and furious ocean. It had been a long and hard journey, and the Pilgrims thanked God for bringing them this far. It was winter, and it was ice cold. The first thing the Pilgrims did was build a place to worship God together. That was the most important thing to them. As they built, they had to live on the wet and drafty Mayflower. It was a very hard life. Just think. No stores, no place to buy wood or tools or food, and the ground was frozen, so they could not plant food. They were hungry all the time and very cold. Soon many of them got sick and began to die. At the end of the winter, nearly half of them had died. But the Pilgrims still thanked God. We can thank God even in our worst circumstances. We can always find something to be thankful for. The Pilgrims prayed all the time for God's help. One day in March, during a church service, God answered a huge prayer. In walked an Indian chief named Samoset. He saw what the Pilgrims needed and came back with an Indian helper named Squanto. Up to this time, the Pilgrims had been very afraid of the Indians. But guess what? Squanto spoke English. You see, a while back, he had been captured by some other explorers and was taken to Spain and sold as a slave. He escaped to England and learned how to speak perfect English. A kind man there paid for his return home. You see how God used that so He could now help the Pilgrims? Wow! It seemed like a bad story when it happened, but we thank God in everything. We can always find a reason to thank Him. God had used this to answer the Pilgrims' prayer. The Pilgrims thanked God. Squanto taught the Pilgrims how to hunt deer and other animals. He taught them how to trap beavers. He taught them how to grow a great crop of corn. The trick was to bury a fish in the ground so the soil would have the right nutrition to grow the best crops. He also helped them to trade with other Indian tribes. How thankful the Pilgrims were to God! The next fall they had lots of crops. The governor, William Bradford, said this would be a day of giving thanks to God. It was in October. We now have Thanksgiving in November. He invited a friendly Indian neighbor to join them at the feast. And he brought 90 guests with him. The Pilgrims did not know how they would feed that many guests, but the Indians had brought 5 deer and 12 wild turkeys to eat. The Pilgrims had prepared lots of vegetables like carrots, beets, cucumbers, and turnips. The Indians taught the Pilgrims how to make cornmeal pudding and how to toast kernels of corn until it popped. Has anyone ever eaten popcorn with your Thanksgiving dinner? Things got very hard again the next winter. More people came on another ship, and they had no food, no warm clothes, and other supplies. The Pilgrims did not have much to share, and each person could only have 5 kernels of corn a day to eat. That is less than 1 spoonful of corn per day. The next summer, there was a drought for 12 weeks, about 3 months. The crops were dying, and the Pilgrims badly needed God's help. They fell on their knees and prayed for 8 hours. How long is 8 hours? It would be just about like praying all day long. Did God hear their prayers? Yes, He did. God's answer was incredible. It was amazing. It started to rain, and it rained for 14 days. The harvest was saved. Once again, the Pilgrims thanked God. So the Pilgrims had another celebration to give thanks to God. The Indians were invited again, and this time there were 120 of them. Once again they had deer, turkey, fruits, and vegetables. Only they had one dish that was a little different. The first thing they were served was a plate of 5 kernels of corn. Remember when they could only eat 5 kernels of corn a day? Well, that is why they served this dish. It was to remind them about God and how He provides for them. This helped them to remember that it was only by God's grace that they had this bountiful harvest. All the hard work and all the skill could not have given them good crops if they didn't have rain. Only God could bring the rain that they needed. Once again, the Pilgrims thanked God for all that He had done for them.